In this chapter, we're going to look at ways to make our scripts more efficient, ways to reuse elements that we've already written, and to avoid redundancy. To do that, we're going to be looking at PHP functions. And that's both the inbuilt functions that are included within PHP and custom functions that we can write ourselves to suit our individual needs. We're also going to be looking at variable scope in the context of functions and ways to pass arguments either by value or by reference to our functions. We're also going to be looking at variable numbers of arguments and the kind of functions that can deal with such a procedure. And we're going to be writing recursive functions which can actually call themselves. We're also going to look at date and time functions. Another thing we're going to cover in this chapter is external scripts, which we can use to reuse elements of code and keep different reusable packets of code separate from each other. We're also going to look at error capture, ways to deal with the inevitable moments when things go wrong with our PHP scripts. Now, to begin with, let's take a look at some simple functions within PHP. We've actually already seen quite a few functions, such as the string function strReplace, such as the database function MySQL connect. We use functions for quite a lot of things that we've done up till now, and although they all do very different things, they all follow a very similar syntax, and that is function name, then a bracket which can take any number of arguments separated by commas. And those arguments can be, say, a number or a string, or they can even be a variable. Let's take a look at an example first. Before we get into functions, we're going to take a look at scripts written without functions and the reasons why we need to use functions. Let's say we wanted to convert a temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Start out with a temp variable, called temp, and we're going to give as the value 80. Then we're going to say converted is going to be temp minus 32 multiplied by 5 and divide by 9. And then we're going to echo converted to the browser. Let's take a look at that in our browser and make sure that works. As we can see, the number 26.6 recurring is the product of our conversion. However, what if we wanted to convert more than one number within our script? Maybe we could keep all three of those lines and then copy them, paste them down to here, and simply change this figure. Let's say we took 212, and we're going to put in an extra line break in between those two. I'm just using these line spaces here to split up the script and make it easier to see what we're doing. There's no particular reason or significance behind those line spaces beyond that. If we go to our browser again and refresh, we can see that the conversion has been done on two different numbers this time by our script. and we know that the conversion's working correctly because 212 Fahrenheit is 100 Celsius. So that's a good test for our converting equation here. However, there is something very wrong with this script, even though it works. These lines are exactly the same, and they're repeated within the script. Now that may not be so much of a problem when we have a script with a total of a very few number of lines, around 12 lines, but as our scripts get more complicated, we'll find that anytime we repeat something, even if it's just a line or a couple of lines, that's a kind of a warning sign. That means that we've somehow been wasteful in our techniques. We've somehow allowed a redundancy to creep in, and we've repeated something that we could have automated. Because that's, after all, what computers are about. They're about finding ways to take the donkey work out of calculations. We shouldn't have to do anything twice. Even if it's just typing a line of code twice, we shouldn't ever be typing the same line of code exactly twice within a program. That's a good rule of thumb. There are some exceptions, very, very rare cases, but that's a great rule of thumb to see whether what we're doing is redundant or not. So, how do we get around this problem? Let's take these lines out. And what we're going to do in order to replace them is to use a function. And how we define our own function is we use this syntax. We use the keyword function, and then we give our function a name. This can be whatever we want. So let's call it F to C, Fahrenheit to Celsius. It's a converter. And we're going to have it store one variable as an argument, and that's going to be included within these round brackets here. Then we're going to have these curly brackets, just like an if statement or a for loop, that encloses the block of code that follows the function definition, and this, whatever we type in here, is what the function will do. So in this case, we're going to define a variable C, and we're going to set it to f minus 32 times 5 divided by 9, and then we're going to use the return command, return C. So essentially, what this does is any time we call this function, f to c, it'll do this, and it'll put whatever we put after the return command in the place of the function that we include within the script. That may be a little confusing. So let's start out with a very simple function, and we're going to call it squeak, and it's going to take no arguments, and all it's going to do is return the word squeak. Actually, let's not use squeak, let's use something onomatopoeic like ee. Okay, now you may be able to guess what this is doing, but I just want to spell out exactly what a function does. We say echo, and then we type in the function name. PHP will arrive at the function name, squeak, and replace it with whatever we've said after return. This is known as a return function. So if we carry out that script, as we can see, it's echoed E to the browser. So we can see basically what's going on with this function. Another thing to note is that the function doesn't have to be defined before we call it. That's why it's a good idea to put our functions right down the bottom of the script, where they're out of the way. This is a new feature as of PHP 4. Now, let's use our Fahrenheit to Celsius converter. Now that we can see how a return function swaps whatever we put after the return command for the function name included in the script. And all we're going to do is we're going to say echo F to C 212. Then we're going to put in a line break, and we're going to say echo F to C 67. We'll save that, and we'll pop back to our browser. As we can see, two figures are given based on two conversions, but we haven't had to write this code twice. All we've had to write twice is the name of our function. So, as we can see, although this is a very simple example, we could automate as much code as we wanted within this code block and save ourselves a lot of hassle further on down the road.